All right, it's 7:02. That's Crested Butte time for let's get started. How's that? All right, everyone. Welcome to the second in Duane Vandenbushe's series of lectures on the Gunnison Country. My name is Shelley Popke. I'm the Executive Director of the Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum, and I'd like to welcome you to this lecture series. Today is going to be about the Black Canyon. We've got a lot of great photos. I would like to let you know that though this lecture series is free, we'd like to encourage you to make a donation that will go towards a scholarship, an education scholarship for a student. I have put the link in the chat. You can make a donation at our website, which is www.crestedbuttemuseum.com. And you can also buy raffle tickets there to support our Black and Not Right Now ball. The raffle is going to be held through the end of the month, and we will do the drawing on July 31st. We have fantastic prizes, so please take a look at that and consider supporting the museum. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. You can see that on your screen. That is the mode that we'll be using this evening. And I would also like to say that we have 190 registrants for this lecture series. So please tell your friends about it. It's going to keep going through September, and looking forward to it. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce Duane Vandenbusche.
Thank you, Shelley, and welcome everybody, and thank all of you for joining. I decided if I'm going to talk about the Black Canyon, I'm going to wear the hat that I did in the canyon going all the way through in 72 and 73. This hat came on the boat with my grandfather from Antwerp, Belgium in 1919, so it's a little over 100 years old, and it's kind of special to me. First thing we're going to do is in 2009, I wrote a book for Arcadia Publishing called The Black Canyon of the Gunnison. So I'm going to put a trivia question out there right now, and whoever gets it, gets the answer, is going to get the book. And the answer will be answered on the chat room or chat, whatever you call it. And the question is, within 50 feet, give the highest point, or the highest point and the highest wall in the Black Canyon. In other words, what's the highest point, the highest wall in the Black Canyon within 50 feet? And answer on the chat. Now, in 1972, two of my friends, Dave Nix and John Rovat, and I went through the Black Canyon from Cimarron all the way, and we used a 75-pound Avon Redshank. The following year, we went all the way through again, used 35-pound Caravel boat. If I ever went through it again and was young enough, I wouldn't use any boat. More about that a little later on. I always thought that we were the first to go all the way, but we were not. The two people who went all the way through the canyon the first time was Jack Gorsuch and Harvey Barsh, a couple of Western State students in 1934. And I've got a couple of great articles on what they did. So here we go on the Black Canyon. The Black Canyon runs from Saponaro,
Oh, we just had a winner.
miles west of Gunnison.
Sorry, we just had a winner.
We got a winner.
We do, Phil Bloys.
Okay, well, make sure we get the address, and we'll send that out to you, Phil. Congratulations.
Yeah, Phil, if you could just put your address in the chat, directed to the panelists. We'll mail that out to you.
All right, thanks, Shelley. As I mentioned, the Black Canyon runs from Saponaro, 26 miles of Gunnison, from Gunnison, to a place called Pleasure Park, and Lazier, where the Gunnison River and the North Fork of the Gunnison come together, and that's not too far from the town of Delta. The walls are 500 to 2,700 feet high. The Gunnison River, which runs through the Black Canyon, has an average drop of 43 feet per mile and that is 7 times more than the Colorado River as it goes through the Grand Canyon. It is the steepest falling river on the North American continent, except the Yellowstone, which has got 3 waterfalls to bail it out. In one sensational section of the canyon, the water drops 268 feet in 1 mile. The Black Canyon has been carved out by the erosion of the Gunnison River over millions of years. And in that photo that you're looking at right now, you see Vernal Mesa, and then on the other side of the canyon would be the Uncompagrey Valley, and you can see how narrow it is. And it's very unique in its narrowness. The canyon is called black because of its depth and its dark and vertical walls and shadows. Plus, in certain parts, the sun shines only 33 minutes a day, only when it's right up above the canyon. The Black Canyon was called the Grand Canyon of the Gunnison by early travelers. Some canyons of the West are longer, some are deeper. However, none combine the depth, the sheerness, the narrowness, and the dread of the Black Canyon. The first people to get down into the canyon and the Gunnison River, there are Ute Indian trails that go down. But the Indians referred to it as big rocks, high water, and they never really stayed down there. John Gunnison came through in 1853 on a railroad survey, trying to find a good route for a transcontinental railroad. He would be killed in Utah in October of that year, but when E.G. Beckwith wrote his report up the following year, he referred to the Black Canyon as, quote, that great gorge we have spent so many days traveling around. His report also said that the Uncompagrey Valley, where Montrose and Delta are today, was a desert and uninhabitable for settlement. In 1874, Albert Peel of the Hayden Geological Survey came through. He referred to it as the Grand Canyon and said, and I'm quoting, "It is inaccessible, and I am therefore obliged to pass by it with merely this reference." In the year 1875, the Ute Indians were taken out of the Los Pinos Indian Agency reservation in the Gunnison Country and moved 12 miles south of Montrose to a place called Kelowna. A military cantonment was 4 miles away at Fort Crawford, and these military men raised crops, and the crops were sensational. When the Ute Indians were moved to Utah in 1881, homesteaders flocked into the Uncompagrey Valley. It appeared to have plenty of water with the Uncompagrey River, very mild climate, and very rich land. And all of this intensified when the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad came to Montrose the following year in 1882. There are 175,000 acres in the valley that are irrigable. 100,000 were taken up by farmers and ranchers. The feeling was that the Uncompagrey River could irrigate all the land. However, the farmers and the ranchers found out that there was only enough water for 30,000 acres, and soon foreclosures were the order of the day, and many people had to leave. In the Black Canyon in that year of 1881, William Jackson Palmer's Denver and Rio Grande Railroad ran for 15 miles along the Gunnison River from Saponaro to Cimarron. Palmer then sent his top surveyor, Byron Brandt, and you're looking at him right now, Byron Brandt into the deepest part of the canyon below Cimarron to see if he could run his railroad through that part of the gorge. Bryant and a 20-man crew went into the canyon in December of '82, thinking it would take 20 days to cover the remaining 38 miles. Every day they took 2.5 hours going into the canyon, 2 hours on the bottom with transit levels, and then 3.5 hours out. They used ropes, and the climbing was tough and dangerous. Every man in the crew except 5 quit after a few days. It took 68 days to go the 38 miles. And when Byron Bryant was finished, he started off his report to William Jackson Palmer with the word impossible. The Rio Grande then came out of the canyon and went over Cerro Summit into Montrose in 1882. And it was dangerous in the Black Canyon. We got another photo coming up. This is 1934 and a Rio Grande engine down. About 30 years ago, I showed that photo to the Stock Growers Association. I said I had no idea who the guy was who was killed. And an old lady, elderly lady, about 75 or 80 in the back of the audience stood up and said, "That was my husband, Sap Richardson." 1934 in the Black Canyon. The Gunnison River in the Black Canyon is separated from the Uncompagrey Valley by the high vernal mesa. And many in the valley look longingly at the water that might be available for the valley if you could get it there via a tunnel. That, however, was a pipe dream, and there appeared to be no way. In 1894, a Montrose miner named Frank Lazon ran transit levels from the Uncompagrey Valley to the Gunnison River in the canyon and found that the river was higher than the Uncompagrey Valley. A tunnel was possible. It could be run by gravity if you could ever build it, but the cost was so high it wasn't considered. In the year 1900, John Welton, a wealthy landowner of the Uncompagrey Valley, equipped a 5-man party to explore the Black Canyon and to see, as he said, the lay of the land. He took in 2 wooden boats called the City of Montrose and the John C. Bell. Both weighed 300 pounds and supplies for 30 days. One of the men with Pelton was a Montrose man named William Torrance, and more about him later. In 21 days, they made 14 miles in the canyon. They lost 1 boat and half of their supplies early in the trip. The boat smashed into kindling wood in the rapids of the canyon. They had great difficulty carrying the heavy boats around water they could not run. At the end of 14 miles, they came to the Falls of Sorrow with perpendicular walls and no knowledge of what lay ahead, the end of the line. They were able to climb out to the North Rim, 50 miles from Montrose on an old burro trail, out of the water and the trip of failure. And there they are. You can see them with their hats off, praying they're going to be able to get out of there. The scene in the Black Canyon now shifted to one Abraham Lincoln Fellows. He was born in 1864 in Maine. He graduated from Yale with a civil engineering degree in 1887, and in that year was hired by an irrigation company in Mancos in southwestern Colorado. And by 1901, he was the hydrographer for the United States Geological Survey in Mancos for southwestern Colorado. What followed rivaled the John Wesley Powell trip down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon in 1869. It began a story of adventure, water, and the role of the federal government in the West 119 years ago. A new federal agency, the Bureau of Reclamation, had been established by the Newlands Act in 1901. If taxpayer money could be spent on river and harbor bills in the East, then by God, federal money could be spent to reclaim arid lands in the West. The arid Uncompagrey Valley seemed a perfect place for that, and it would be the first great Bureau of Reclamation project in history. Fellows was hired by the Bureau to go into the Black Canyon and survey for a possible diversion tunnel to get Gunnison River water into the Uncompagrey Valley. He was very aware of the Bryant survey of 1882 and 83, but not satisfied with it. Important questions, he said, had to be answered. What was the nature of the rock? Was it possible to even go through the canyon? And if so, where would the tunnel site be? Fellows advertised in the Montrose newspaper for an assistant to go with him, and it read, "Must be a good swimmer, athletic, good mountain climber, temperate, unmarried, able to obey orders, and have no one dependent upon him." The man who answered the ad was the man that Fellows hoped would apply, William Torrance of Montrose, who had been with the Pelton expedition the year before. And there they are, William Torrance on the left, 29 years old, Montrose and Abraham Lincoln Fellows on the right. Torrance was asked by fellows what kind of boats they would use, and he said, "We're not taking any boats." Fellows said, "We are about to go into some of the most dangerous water ever, and we don't even know what's in front of us." He said, "I don't think I needed to put sanity as a requirement in the damn ad a little earlier for you to become a member of this trip." And Torrance said, and he was exactly right, and he said, "No, we're not taking any boats. You can't run a lot of that water, and it's too difficult to move the boats around," and I certainly agree. He said, "Here's what we're going to do. Each one of us is going to have a small air mattress. We're going to put our instruments in a rubber bag that is airtight. We're each going to have 100 feet of silk lifeline rope, and we're going to have knives, and we're going to walk along one side of the Gunnison River, and when we get cliffed out, we're going to dog paddle on the air mattress to the other side." They would be in the water, crossing from one side to the other 76 times on their trip. And then fellows asked the important question, what happens if we get cliffed out on both sides? And William Torrance said, "We'll cross that bridge if and when we come to it." An old trapper and a hunter of the Cimarron Montrose area, a man named Moccasin Bill, told fellows that there were Indian trails down in the canyon and that he had been about halfway through. But fellows and Torrance found out later on that was a lie. Captain James Klein, who had a ranch 3 miles up Cimarron Creek, said the same. Cimarron was known as Klein's Ranch in those days. In June of 1901, fellows established a camp on top of Vernal Mesa and conducted 2 months of preliminary surveying. "I never lost an opportunity to study the canyon from the top and of finding ways of getting down into it," said Abraham Lincoln Fellows. The man in charge of supplying them, and you're looking at him right now in the canyon, was Asa Dillon of Montrose. He would be used to bring supplies down to 3 points in the canyon, quote, "waiting at each one in turn until we should arrive, or until there was no longer any hope that we would ever arrive." And today, as you drive west of Gunnison about 15 miles, you see a fantastic rock formation that are known as the Dillon Pinnacles, named for Asa Dillon. Fellows said that without Dillon, the expedition would never have made it. Before leaving to go into the canyon, fellows took Torrance advice, and the air mattresses, rubber bag for instruments, and they would be able to drink river water. On August the 12th, 1901, fellows and Torrance rode the Denver and Rio Grande train to Cimarron from Montrose. When the conductor let them off, a woman on the train remarked, quote, "I'm glad you had put them 2 tramps off the train." They certainly weren't going on a vacation. They were out there to work. The 2 men photographed the start and then set out at 3 p.m. In August, the water was warmer and lower, and they now headed into terra incognita. Only tales and legends and bits and pieces of information existed. They headed downriver with the heavy rubber bags and the instruments in them on their backs. The walking was tough, over boulders with mountain lion dens, bear tracks, mountain sheep, beaver, and astonishing eagles circling overhead, wondering what in the hell these 2 guys were doing in the canyon. Once they started, there would be no turning back and probably not much opportunity to climb out. They would be committed. Fellows and Torrance crossed the Gunnison River 76 times. And there you can see Torrance in the water with the rubber bag on top of the air mattress going from one side to the other. They would be under pressure from the constant roar of the river. Twice they avoided danger from huge rocks coming down from above, and they often walked on mountain sheep trails 300 feet above the water. Once fellows fell 20 feet into gooseberry bushes and luckily was not hurt. On the 3rd day, they passed the wreck of the John C. Bell of the Pelton expedition. And on that day, they got to Trail Gulch, where they were met for the first time by Asa Dillon. They asked Dillon for new shoes at the next stop, and they sent Phil out with him. in case we did not make it. In the canyon, the two men could not eat fish because a cyanide process in the stamp mills of Lake City on the Lake Fork had killed them. The men rested at Trail Gulch for 2 nights and a day, sleeping most of the time. And on the 16th, the 5th day of the trip, headed out again. They soon saw the giant stairway and the painted wall on the side of the canyon walls. And on the 17th, went beyond where anybody had ever ventured. You can see here Abraham Lincoln Fellows with his transit. They never forgot the purpose of the trip, and that is to find a tunnel site to divert Gunnison River water into the Uncompagrey Valley. And that's the thing that they had inside those rubber bags, and they were fairly heavy. Fellows and Torrance now built giant bonfires out of huge piles of driftwood which lined the Gunnison River to show Dillon that they were alive and that they had reached that point. The two men now passed the Falls of Sorrow, where the Pelton party had come out. They saw the ropes and the supplies left. Downstream, they came to the Narrows, and you're looking at it right now, with the canyon walls 2,000 feet high and the width of the river only 44 feet. Now, that was one of the parts of the canyon that concerned me the most. The water is fast, and you must touch the left wall, because if you don't, and you even get out a little bit in the middle of that water, you are going over a 25-foot waterfall and into the rocks. And that's where Rovat and Nix and I were a little concerned. And I was in the front of the boat, and I just told Dave and John, and we had no trouble. They touched that left wall, and then you're able to get out. Fellows said to Torrance, "You said we'll cross this bridge when we come to it if we are cliffed out on both sides. Now what do we do?" Torrance grabbed his air mattress and his rubber bag, and with a mist and a tremendous roar, he had no idea what lay in front of him, went into the water with the comment, "Here goes nothing." Now you can see in the next photograph, this is myself in 1973, standing at the head of the Narrows with my hand up. And you can see that white ring on the side of the canyon walls. That is how high the water has gotten throughout history, up to 9,000 second feet going through. We went through at 2,700, and I wouldn't go through at 28. And at the far end of that is that waterfall. But as I said, we had no trouble. So Torrance made it, and there he is. That's the waterfall that you would go over and into if you didn't get out of the Narrows. Fellows followed, and both men came out dazed and bleeding in a pool of water because there was so much water going through it, spit them out over the rocks and into a pool. So they made it. The two men now met Asa Dillon just below the Narrows, and they got resupplied. That night, after drying out their clothes as they did every night, they camped 300 feet above the water with the river roaring and the eagles eyeballing them. There's another good picture of the waterfall. On the 18th, Fellows and Torrance hoped the worst was over, but it was just getting started. They now came to a quarter-mile section where huge rocks had fallen off the canyon walls, burying the Gunnison River 20 to 40 feet below. The two men had to swim in those rivulets, smashing against the rocks. It took them 6 hours to go 400 yards. It took us 6 hours to go 400 yards. And what we did was put a log from one rock to the other, and then one of us would walk the log with a rope around our side. At 2 o'clock that day, the two men were hungry, sick, and exhausted and wet. While hiking 40 feet above the river, they surprised 2 mountain sheep which were sleeping and startled them. One fell 40 feet into the rocks, breaking a shoulder. Fellows and Torrance killed it and ate a hind quarter. And there you can see William Torrance with the mountain sheep. Fellows said, I knew we were probably breaking the game laws, but I know that the game and fish probably would forgive us. After this tough section, the two men hit the most beautiful part of the canyon, Torrance Falls, a series of waterfalls on the river named for Torrance by fellows. On the 19th, they were in heavy rain, and they met Asa Dillon for the final time at beautiful Red Rock Canyon. And they were tempted to come out there because they believed they had found a tunnel site, because he had taken those transit readings regularly through the canyon. However, they figured as long as they were in, they might as well go another 10 miles when they thought they might hit a farmhouse and the trip would end. They continued, but no farmhouse, and no water, and no food. They slept in the canyon, and the following day hit a burro trail and began to come out. On the way out, they came to a farmhouse with the door locked, but with 2 apple pies on the windowsill. They opened the window and ate the 2 pies, and then left a note for the ranch wife explaining their predicament and telling her they would be back to make amends. On the 21st, the 10th day, they finally came out of the canyon and eventually got to Delta, where they took the train to Montrose, arriving at 12:45. They were bruised, cut, exhausted, dehydrated. Each man had lost 15 pounds, but they had made it. 3 years later, the Bureau of Reclamation, working on the Gunnison Tunnel, diverted water into the Uncompagrey Valley. From 1904 to 1909, work went on from east or river portal in the canyon, and you're looking at it, and then from Luani or west portal, 8 miles from Montrose. The cost of the tunnel would be $10 million. 24 men died building it. Each portal had a living quarters, a sawmill, a power plant, and engineers. In one section of the tunnel, the men came upon crumbling rock, and I'm quoting, where ancient sea creatures existed. When the workers met in the middle of the tunnel, they were 11/100ths of an inch off. The tunnel was 30,852 feet long, or 6 miles long, and was heavily timbered. It was the longest irrigation tunnel in the world, and the first big Bureau of Reclamation project in history, called the Uncompagrey Project. Now you're looking at the guys working in the tunnel. And I've been through the tunnel twice in October, one legally and one illegally. And they have now put wood on top that covers it, and that is where the water comes out of the east portal and out into 8 miles from Montrose, and then waters the Uncompagrey Valley. There are 600 miles of laterals, canals, and ditches that were built in the Uncompagrey Valley, a tremendous engineering achievement. And I've been there, and there are some real steep sections where kayaks practice in those laterals and ditches and canals. The Uncompagrey Valley now had enough water, and towns like Kelowna and Montrose and Olathe and Pea Green and Delta were saved. On September 23rd, 1909, President William Howard Taft came to Luani, or the West Portal, to throw the switch to start the water flowing. And there is the big fella at Luani. Abraham Lincoln Fellows said later it had all been worth it. And I'm quoting him now. When I think of the hardships, of the moments where there seemed to be no light ahead, where it appeared that the present moment was the last, I think too of the now prosperous homes in the Uncompagrey Valley, of the many happy homes, the beautiful orchards, the schoolhouses filled with children. And I am content knowing that out of trial good cometh. He was a religious man. Abraham Lincoln Fellows died in 1942 at the age of 78. He had a long and great career as an engineer, but he always said that the highlight of his life was the 10 days on the edge of a knife in the Black Canyon during August of 1901. he would never be able to duplicate those days of glory. Today, the Taylor Reservoir, built from 1935 to 1937 by the Bureau of Reclamation, holds 106,200 acre-feet of water. And that water is owned by the Uncompagrey water users of the Uncompagrey Valley. When they need the water, they can call for it. And it comes to them via the Blue Mesa Reservoir and the Gunnison Tunnel. The Black Canyon became a national monument in 1932 and a national park in 1999, one of 4 in Colorado, along with Rocky Mountain National Park, Mesa Verde, and the Great Sand Dunes. 200,000 visitors come every year, and the national park has visitor centers on both the south and the north rim. The Black Canyon has some of the toughest and greatest mountain climbs in the nation, including the Painted Wall in the north and south chasm, pioneered by a great boulder climber named Leighton Core in the 1960s. Other great climbing routes exist on the Painted Wall and the Giant Stairway and have attracted some of the best climbers in the world, including Jimmy Newberry of Cimarron, who's the postmaster. Newberry and some friends pioneered a route on the wall called Hallucinogen. And it wasn't named for drugs. It was named because you never quite knew what the route was going to be above you. One of the strange occurrences in the Black Canyon involved the saga of Robert Nelson, the Hermit of the Canyon. Nelson was born in Stockholm, Sweden in 1859, and he came to the U.S. as a young man in 1880. He worked in Omaha for a few years, and then he came to Denver and Fairplay working on the railroad. Nelson wound up working on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, living in Saponara and working in the Black Canyon. In 1897, he declared, "There is too much trouble in the world," and he quit the railroad and he began to live in the Black Canyon. He picked out a spot 1 mile below the Curricanti Needle that you're looking at, and Chipeta Falls. At that spot was an acre of good level soil surrounded by pine trees. And there for 47 years, Robert Nelson lived. And there is Chipeta Falls, right across from the Curricanti Needle, dropping into the Black Canyon. He fished, raised hogs and chickens, raised vegetables, berries, and had apple trees. He sold his produce, riding the train to Saponara, and then when only one freight train ran a week, he often walked to Saponara. He had a cabin, an outhouse, and a chicken coop in the canyon. And to help local farmers get their potatoes to market from Black Mesa, he hand-built a steep wagon road from the Black Mesa Road up above down to his cabin in the railroad, 1,800 vertical feet down. The last 200 were too steep for a road, so Nelson devised a way by use of block and tackle to lower the wagons down to the canyon floor. Then the potatoes could be loaded on the train. Denver and Rio Grande railroaders tossed newspapers and magazines off the train for Nelson to read and checked on him often. In 1936, railroad men tried to get him to get a government pension, which he was happy to try and get, but later on he said, "I'm not going to sign the papers saying that I didn't want charity." In 1944, after 47 years living alone in the Black Canyon, Nelson, at age 85, contracted pneumonia, was taken into Gunnison, where he died on April the 4th. He is buried in an unmarked grave in the Gunnison Cemetery. And today, the Hermit's Rest Trail into the Black Canyon, which drops 800 feet from the Black Mesa Road, is named for the famous Hermit of the Black Canyon. Another interesting and funny story involving the Black Canyon involves the Black Canyon nude of the 1950s. Two sisters from Montrose were first to spot the nude man, quote, attired in canvas sneakers and a pair of binoculars around his neck. The Montrose newspaper reported, "The nude rushes back to the canyon every summer like tourists and mosquitoes." The Montrose sheriff investigated and he thought the man was interested in good fishing. And then, quote, he strips off and goes back to nature. The Denver Post got news of this and referred to him as the Cimarron Nude and the Black Canyon Nude. And the girls who saw him said he had a real red suntan. Today, the waters of the Gunnison River and the Black Canyon have been harnessed by 3 dams, Blue Mesa, Mora Point, and Crystal. But through the mists of time, we can still see the snorting engines of the Denver Rio Grande carefully making their way along the roaring waters of the Gunnison River. We can see fellows in Torrance on the edge of a knife in the bowels of the canyon. Leighton Corn, Jim Newberry, suspended on a 2,700-foot vertical wall. Rainbow and brown trout leaping into the air during the willow fly hatch in the spring. Eagles circling, bear, mountain lions, and coyotes prowling, and the incredible beauty of one of the world's great wonders, the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Thank you all for tuning in. If there are any comments or questions, put them on a chat, and I'll be trying to answer.
Thanks, Duane. We've got a question from Mark Walker. Duane, tell us about the circumstances of the Ute tribe, their relationship to the land, circumstances, and how they were treated.
Well, the Ute Indians came to Colorado, we think, around 1600, and they were the Indians of the Western Slope. And there were 3 tribes, the Northern Utes, which were up around Craig and Meeker, the Uncompagrey Utes of Gunnison and the Uncompagrey Valley, and then the Southern Utes down around Ignacio and Toywalk in southwestern Colorado. And as miners and ranchers came in, the Utes were eventually moved out by a series of 4 treaties. One of them in 1863, they gave up the San Luis Valley. One in 1873, they had to give up the San Juan. And eventually they were moved out to Kelowna. And then, because of good farmland and ranch land in the Uncompagrey Valley, they were forced out and moved to the Uinta Indian Reservation, which was kind of a godforsaken place out near Salt Lake City. The Southern Utes were allowed to stay in Colorado. And the Meeker Massacre, which occurred in 1879 in northern Colorado, was used by the white man to get the Utes out. If you go to southwestern Colorado, they've got a casino down there in a town called Toywalk. So the Ute Indians were treated like a lot of the other Native Americans were in the American West, and not very well, with the white man breaking one treaty after another. Thanks for asking, Mark. Any other questions or comments?
From the Pleasure Park, how many miles up the river does the canyon begin? From Beverly Jordy.
Well, I don't know where you're going from Pleasure Park. If you go all the way to Saponaro, it's 55 miles.
Awesome, thanks,
Any other
Duane.
questions or comments?
While we're waiting for some more questions, could you tell us about next week's lecture?
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you about next week. Next week will be a real interesting one. We're going to talk about the great silver camps of the Gunnison Country, which opened up about 1879 and lasted to the silver panic of 1893. So we'll be talking about Irwin and White Pine and Gothic and Pitkin and Tin Cup and a lot of the other smaller camps that didn't make it very long. But there's a great deal of great history involving gold and silver in particular. Phil's got a question. Who are the workers in the tunnel? Most of them were local people from Montrose, and a lot of them had been miners in some of the early mining camps. Thank you for your comment, Rebecca.
There was
Any
also
other questions, folks?
I saw a question about from Jan Reed. She missed the first session. Is it possible to watch? And we will be posting recordings of all of these presentations on our website, which is crestedbuttemuseum.com.
And one little tidbit also that we'll be doing a little later this summer, I'll be doing 10 podcasts for History Colorado. And we'll also let you know about that. But right now, I want to really thank Nell Burkett and Shelley and their entire staff for hosting this and being kind and helping me out in every way. Any other questions, folks? We had a great audience tonight. So Fred Schumann, thank you very much. One of my old runners. Mike, thank you. Jeremy, thank you. Fred, where are you at now? You in Guam? Oh, you are in Guam. Wow. That's impressive.
Ooh,
Thank
Steve
you.
says, congrats on your state historian appointment. So that starts 1st of
Well,
August,
thank
right?
you. I'm very happy to, my official duties will start on August 1, and it's very nice to have a state historian from the Western Slope. I'm the first one that's not from the Front Range, so I hope to do some real good things for the Western Slope and the Gunnison Country. Yeah, the tunnel was not lined with a pipe. No, it just ran right on the bottom. And of course you had rock on top to start with, and then they put wood on a little later on. So it simply ran through the tunnel, and they had a cement bottom. And I've been through it in an automobile a couple of times. And if you got claustrophobia, you don't want to be in the tunnel. And they have to leave the gates open on both sides, obviously, so the air can come in. But it runs by gravity, obviously.
Duane, there's a question about how you managed to remember all these dates.
Well, I teach the Colorado history, and the Black Canyon has for a long time been my stomping grounds. When I first came to the Gunnison Country, the dams weren't in. And I didn't know anything about fishing, but I went on the old railroad grade, and even an idiot could catch fish, which I was. And I'll never forget that the browns would be in the rocks and the rainbows would be a little more out in the water. And I'd always come back with my limit, and I'd always come back and it looked like I'd been in a fight because I would be bruised up by falling on the rocks. And Kaya Lindgren, you know, Sven never took me fishing, but boy, do I think of him often. Good to have you aboard. Tell Brigida hi.